I'd like to welcome everybody to the session Can Trade Relations Promote Food Sustainability? We have five speakers and 1 hour 25 minutes. I think as the former one, this one also is an exciting topic. I have worked personally, just that you know where I come from, I work at the Center for Development and Environment at the University of Bern, and I have a legal background. I have worked in interdisciplinary settings for years on question on trade in agriculture and how trade in agriculture could be formulated in more nuanced ways in order to promote food sustainability in all partner countries, both in North and in the South. So this is where I come from. I'm also involved in different research projects, including Project of Johanna, but others. I also leading a project on these related questions, on how to reframe trade agreements. But now it's not the time for me to present my work, but for the others to present their work. I'd like to hand over to the presenters. They all have some 7 to 8 minutes to present, so we have enough time for discussion. We have 15 minutes per presenter, and then in the end we should have 15 minutes available for overall discussion. With this, I'd like to hand over to Stefan Mann, who is the first presenter. His topic is entitled Towards a Post-Lethal Agricultural System. It deals with the question of whether meat production should be treated in a different way in agricultural policies, but also in trade policies. Stefan, please go ahead.
Well, thank you. The presentation I want to give does not have too much to do with trade, although it could become very trade relevant. It has to do with the fact that I expect that we have to prepare for an agriculture which does not involve killing animals. To make it very clear from the very beginning, I love meat. I love to eat meat, but that does not deter me from making some observations which I would like to share with you, which I would describe as a vegan wave. And then in a second step, I would then cover a few points which may impact from that vegan wave. Is there any chance, Lisa, that you could share my presentation on your screen?
Yes, I try. I have prepared this.
I have read a lot of literature on the question, is it ethical to kill animals for human consumption? And I must say I've found many good philosophical articles on that question, and I found not a single one who would conclude in the affirmative. So there's a vast majority among ethicists that it is not legitimate for various reasons to kill animals for human consumption. And if we take it serious that we follow expert opinion, what, for example, on the Corona case, many people decide to, then I'm wondering how far we should believe the ethicists who claim it is unethical to kill animals for human consumption. Well, and then the first question is, how does this translate? How does this expert opinion translate into popular opinion? And if you look at surveys, it is slowly changing. In the first decade of our century, most surveys in the Western world had around 80% of people saying it is legitimate to kill animals for human consumption. In the second decade of the 21st century, it has only been like 70%, for example, in the United States and Germany. So the majority of people thinking it is ethical to kill animals for human consumption is still there, but it is shrinking. The second translation comes then to behavior. Would people still eat meat? And then we by now have a rising share of vegetarians by 10%. So there, again, seems to be a translation problem of the 30% who do say, well, it's unethical, but 20% or the 2/3 of them are still saying, well, I still do it. I still eat meat. And then another translation is to veganism, because I mean, also for drinking milk, also for eating eggs, animals have to be killed in the current way they are produced. But this only covers a very small minority of 1 or 2% worldwide of people who are not eating animal products out of conviction. So I see 3 translation problems, but translation sooner or later will probably succeed. And therefore I see on this demand side a huge wave, which will probably lead to the demand of agricultural systems in which animals are not killed. On the supply side, yes, thank you for this for the slide. You see a lot of fancy products, and starting from lab-grown meat to meat from soybeans or other substitutes from plant products. They have become so much better over the last 20 years that this is matching the increasing demand for not killing animals. And just imagine if they have reached the quality of contemporary meat, and imagine they would not be more expensive than meat, what would be the reasons to consume meat or other animal products like eggs or milk? Why should we kill animals if we have the same nutritional quality with other products? So this is the supply side of the question, why I would justify that we should strongly think about options. What are agricultural systems that could not kill animals? And this is covered by 1 or 2 more slides. There we have the question of nutrient supply. How would we substitute animal manure? There are many ways to substitute animal manure in agriculture. One is the biocyclic vegan system, where they mainly work with compost. Then I made a photo with a big bag of mineral fertilizer, which is probably the most conventional way of substituting organic fertilizer. Then we have slurry from human feces. So mulching is a 4th example. So there are a lot of ways how we can make up for not putting animal manure on the fields anymore. And another question would be, particularly for us in Switzerland, what would happen with all the grassland? And again, there are many ways what would happen to grassland. Parts of them you can plow and use as arable land. Part of them you can mow with machines. Or as soon as they are on steeper slopes, you probably would have to employ animals, or at least this would be the most efficient solution, but you still do not have to kill the animals. And now I would briefly like to mention, before I hand over to the moderation of the discussion, that it's also possible to keep animals and not to kill them, either just for grassland management or for producing milk and perhaps even eggs, but then just not killing the animals who do not give milk anymore, but just let them live as long as they can. So in my conclusion, I would say there are a lot of options for non-lethal or post-lethal agricultural production, agriculture which is not killing anymore. And we are probably coming to a stage where we will have demand for this. So whether we choose vegan organic or vegan conventional or post-lethal vegetarian agriculture, we should probably start occupying ourselves with this also in policy preparation and in agricultural system research. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for this brief presentation on a very inspiring, it's a very inspiring presentation. Could you, before I give the floor to the others, could you say a few words on how your input relates to the overall question of sustainable trade in agriculture?
Yes, I mean, there will be the question if all regions, probably not all regions in the world will start at the same time implementing the vegan systems. And then you will have to decide under which conditions will you let animal products into your country. But this is just then a case for the more overarching questions. To which extent do you want to let products into your country which are not produced in a sustainable way? So it's a specification of a more general question: how do we discriminate between sustainable products and non-sustainable products?
Mm-hmm. Okay, and could you imagine a way on how to distinguish between those ways of production if you take into account your approach to discriminate against meat production? Yeah.
Well, I was today asked by another colleague, what do I see as the time frame of this vegan wave? And I answered, well, I don't know, but it will probably be something between 20 and 200 years. So we are really talking about long-term issues. I could imagine pretty soon, much sooner than 20 years, that we could discriminate in the import of animal products compared to vegetable products, by putting extra tariffs on them, not only for ethical reasons, but mainly for environmental reasons.
Mm-hmm. And the last question from my side, is this valid as a kind of the discrimination against meat production? Would that be the same for Switzerland, for example, as for a poorer country in poor African country? Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Also for a poorer African country, it's not defendable from an environmental nor from an ethical view to not discriminate between products with a large environmental footprint and with a small environmental footprint.
I think this is quite contentious, what you're saying here, but controversial, and it would be interesting to discuss this point. I'd like to give the floor to the others being present to the session. Would someone want to raise a question?
My name is Mario Gianpietro. Mm-hmm. Can you hear me?
Yes, fine.
Yes, I have a project in Namibia, Botswana. All these countries basically are eating meat, not because it's with the double production of cross meat, because it's the only type of food that they can have, like in all the other semi-aseptic things. So I believe that it should be a little bit more, it's a little bit more complicated, let's put it this way. One thing is that producing crops to feed animals, to make money, that is what we do. As a matter of fact, I will present something about this. And one thing is about meat in general, because meat in the Arctic areas, in the desertic area, is the only possible biomass that people can eat. So it cannot be that, you know, is a little bit more complicated. I don't know if.
Stefan?
Yes, I've been living in areas where the most easy thing to produce was meat. I'm not saying that this will all happen in these regions very soon. I'm just saying that in regions where we can do without meat, and that this is certainly the vast majority of regions, this wave will most probably come sooner than in other regions, which will have plenty of time to think of ways how they could adapt to new claims on both the environment and on moral issues.
Mm-hmm. Mario, would you like to reply, or I go to the otherwise I go to the
it's okay. It's okay. It's just, I would just to flag that it's complicated. Okay.
Yeah, it's complicated. I would agree. Mm-hmm. There's another question by Mahmoud Mohammed through the chat. He asks, do you think that this is part of the organic model, and how can grow numbers of livestock with continuous consuming of their meat?
How we can grow livestock?
Numbers of livestock with... Mohammed, are you here to explain your question? How, if you open the Q&A,
I've seen the question.
I have to see the question. Mohammed, could you specify a bit, also by writing?
Well, I can mm-hmm. try to answer it. I think so far there is a group proposing vegan organic agriculture, which they call biocyclic. I think it would be a mistake to just rely on organic agriculture. I think it should be a broader movement, and because the efficiency of mineral fertilizer is so large that I would advise against ignoring it. So I think it should be a joint effort of people proposing conventional and other people proposing organic agriculture to follow this post-lethal agricultural production.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Stefan, for this answer. Is there another question or comment to the presentation of Stefan? Aha, Mohammed writes here that I hear you, but I face some technical problems, so he
All
cannot
right.
reply to you. Huh? So, yeah, as I understand, it's quite visionary what you're doing. I fully agree that we should develop visions. Without any visions, there will be any changes. But this discussion, as I understand, is still in the beginning, and it's. I think for this, it's a very nice contribution to push in the direction of having a kind of a non-ideological discussion about the importance of meat production here in the northern world, but also in other countries. Someone else? If not, Stefan, would you want to say a word on where you are working? You did not present yourself.
Yes, I'm heading the socioeconomics research group by Agroscope. Agroscope is the federal research station of Switzerland. And this is just one of the strains we are following to start at least accounting for the externalities of animal production, because they are really on factors different from the externalities of crop production.
Okay, thank you. Stefan, there's a last question. If you open the Q&A session. Dear Professor Stefan, thank you for bringing the issue on board. Killing animals, both domestic and wild animals, for food is common. In developing countries, animals are used for different purposes, such as transportation, ploughing, and others. In addition to this, there is also strong human-wildlife conflict where different wild animals are killed because community considered them as pests to their crop and cattle. In some cases, wild animals are considered as a source of food. Most importantly, there is no other alternatives for most of poor families and communities to substitute this. What do you advise us?
Very good question, because even in Switzerland, where you should think there are no wild animals left, we have a very similar issue with the wolf, that many farmers hate the wolves for understandable reasons, as they kill their sheep. I think it's a fundamentally different question, and the wolf is a good example, because you would not want to eat wolf meat, but nevertheless you would like to protect your animals from the wolf. As I said, I understand perfectly well if people are killing animals because they have to feed themselves. That this is currently not the state we are in anymore in the north. This is still the state where we're still in the south. But I would separate between the two questions: the animals, wild animals, destroying my own agricultural production. In this case, of course, you have to protect yourself, or killing animals for eating them.
Is it fine with you? This question was from Opsuhirko Diriba, or would you like to respond? I think it's fine. Thank you very much, Stefan, for raising this very contentious issue. But this is academia is here to raise contentious issues and to develop pathways for the future. Thank you very much, Stefan. With this, I'd like to hand over to Mario Giampietro. He will present a study his presentation is entitled A Nexus Approach to Study the Sustainability of Social Ecological Systems, Implication for SDG Governance. But yes, and Mario will explain you what it is about. Please present yourself first before starting, okay. And then you have some 7 to 8 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Mario Giampietro. I will give, I understand it's a strange presentation. The title. Right. What we do, this is a presentation coming from a big European project, MAGIC, moving to adaptive governance in complexity. The material basically has been produced by Juan Cadillo, Benoit Cazar, and Ansel Renner. I am just taking credit for it. And then what this was about, in MAGIC we were doing what we call quantitative storytelling, checking the stories and that we are getting using numbers and looking at different perspectives of the issue. So in this case, we are giving an analysis of the plausibility of the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy. That is that basically it would be possible to increase the productivity, keep the economic viability of farmers, and save the environment by having better technology. And what is the role of trade in it? So there are quite daunting predicaments in front of us. Basically, we are talking in the year 2050, we will have to increase dramatically the production of food. And at the same time, we are getting more and more aware that the fact that biodiversity is going and the environmental impact is too high. So the solution, the European Union has been going for agribusiness. And then I would say that the results are impressive. If you get the Netherlands is the second agricultural exporter in money. So basically, the Netherlands has less land per capita, arable land per capita in China. And just to give you an idea, they are exporting almost the double in terms of money of Canada, even though they are having 1/50 of the land. By the fact, Netherlands export in money more than Canada and Argentina together. That is unbelievable. So what is the effect of this agribusiness on the rural communities? So we can see here that between 2000 and 2010, the value of export tripled, and the farmers in this period reduced 27%. And then if you're looking for 2010 to now, the farmers keep going down. So basically, it seems that it's not necessarily agribusiness is good for farmers or rural community. So what we developed is a tool of analysis that is using 3 different metrics at the same time. It's based on complexity theory. So basically, we are mapping things using quantitative analysis by using different metrics. You can, there is a deliverable that explains it, so you can have a look at it. So basically, what do? We are analyzing things using a macroscope, analyzing things using a mesoscope, and then another about the microscope, what happened in details. So looking at the macroscope, you can look at what the different countries are eating. So basically, we can define food patterns, and you can see that these are different European countries, and you can see that, as a matter of fact, the diet is pretty different. And what you eat can make a difference. And then this is to take in account the demand of the society. On the other hand, you can look at the level of openness of the system, the mesoscope, how much is exported and imported. At this level, you can see, for instance, that in terms of living animals, there is an intense exchange of animals inside Europe, especially France is one of the major exporters. But what is more important is the export and import that we are having divided by vegetable, animal, and feed. Especially the import of feed that are huge. You see that more than 70% more all over Europe, but Ireland, they are all coming from outside Europe. So basically, we have a link that we are getting high product value by producing basically animal product by importing low value products from developing countries. And then, so how can we see the implication of this fact? Then we have to use the microscope. With the microscope, you can look at how much land, how much water, how much labor, how much biodiversity, destruction of habitats you are doing. And then if you see this, you start looking things in a different way. For instance, that for different type of region of Europe, you can clearly see that what we are importing is much more than what we are producing domestically. And then if you are looking at the land use, you can see that basically no European country could produce what is consuming using their own land. There are countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, they are using like 15 times more agricultural land that they have. Then you can go for labor, and basically you see that we are using like 5, 6 times, 3 times more labor embodied in the import than the actual labor that we have in our workforce. As a matter of fact, as we were looking before, our workforce has been liquidated. Basically, we have like 2%, 1% farmers in the workforce. And then this approach can be used to do simulation. Like, for instance, we could have, like, this is an example in Austria. And basically, you can see what is the arable land that is used and what would be required if we would have to produce on our own what we are consuming. The red part is what is required for animal products, and the green part for the vegetable of different types. And you can see that not only it will be impossible because we will not have enough land, but also this would require an additional intensification of the agricultural production that would be lethal for the environment, like 500 kilo of nitrogen per kilo. This is not possible. It would be, this is an absurd simulation simply to show that in reality we are externalizing to other countries an enormous environmental pressure in terms of pesticide, the destruction of habitat, and that this raise some serious concern, because of course we saw before these cheap commodities that we are importing will not last long, because if we will imagine to increase 70%, 100% the food demand at the world level, of course we cannot expect that to have cheap commodity forever. Okay, this more or less is the presentation. If you want to have a look of the approach, there is this report, and then we have a series of short video illustrating this type of things as below, and also we will have 2 webinars, one about post-normal science, the different way of using science, and another about uncomfortable knowledge in Europe, that is the policy event on the right. So you are welcome to come to any of these webinars. I don't know which one. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Maria, for this very inspiring presentation. I don't know now if you could close your presentation, or yes. Okay. So yes. Now. Okay. I see the others. Thank you very much. A very inspiring presentation. I have a first question. You showed quite nicely how we kind of European countries externalize environmental costs, and which also leads to problems not only in the other countries where the costs are kind of taking place, but also in Europe. What would be the suggestion you would have for a trade system to promote food sustainability, not only at home, but also in other countries?
Yeah, I believe the people could start doing this type of analysis, because nobody does it. We use economic narratives, assuming the comparative advantage that, you know, there are no limits, no matter what, the human ingenuity, the invisible end of the market, and so on. This is simply not true. You can measure how much land, water, I mean, in our group, we have the group of 20 UXTRA water footprint. I didn't have time, but if you look for water, it's exactly the same. So basically, it is not true that it's impossible to see what happened, what is embodied in what you're importing. It's very easy. This is what we did. The fact is nobody wants to know it. In terms of agriculture labor, I mean, I don't remember now, but I mean, the Netherlands is using millions of farmers equivalent in what they are importing. And these millions in South America are not doing a particularly nice life, let's put it this way. So, I mean, also in relation to the vegetarian discussion, I mean, we are vegetarian, but we are eating asparagus coming refrigerated from Peru, where they are produced in the desert by mining underground water. And nobody cares. I mean, that these type of things are not impossible to see. If you want to see, you can clearly see. So the real question is why we don't take in consideration this information, what is called uncomfortable knowledge, when we discuss about policies. This is the simple point made by this presentation.
So thank you, Joe. So your argument would be to first look closely at what really happens and then to work on policy options. Would you also work on policy options, in which direction it could go in the future if it needs to resolve this problem?
Really, I don't know, because what happened is that the solution given at the moment by the European Commission with the CAP is doing more of the same. So we are getting more and more locked in animal production, because basically animal production is the only things that make possible to have a high level flow to the farmers, because the period that you're waiting for the crops to grow is happening in South America or in Far East. So if you are milking cows, you are milking cows every day, 3 times a day. Whereas if you are growing crops, you have crops once a year. So you use your tractor once a year, you're using the milk parlor every day. So in terms of investment, operating with animal products give you more added value than if you are producing crops. By the way, this was a PhD student of George Escurejan, a famous economist that started the discussion about bioeconomy.
Okay, thank you. So with this, I'd like to give the floor to the participants. There is one question from Eloy Jorge asking, couldn't intensive organic farming also be highly damaging? Shouldn't it be more important to promote food diversification? If you open the Q&A session.
Yeah.
To see the question.
Yeah, look, unfortunately, I am old. So the more I study, the less I understand. So I cannot tell you what is the best thing to do, because there is no best thing to do. We have to create all together and learn. And yes, I agree that intensive organic farming could be problematic also because it requires a lot of labor. And then unless you have a huge amount of subsidies, it doesn't go if you want to do massive production. Yeah, we should promote food diversification. But why we are getting in monoculture? Because it is the only things you can mechanize. If you are doing what happened once, shifting cultivation in the forest, which is fantastic, but then you cannot mechanize. You have to do by hand. And then this is what we did. Basically, we transform agriculture in an organ that's feeding cities. Our agriculture is no longer about rural development, protecting the environment, the agriculture. No, it's about producing the city, feeding the city as cheap as possible, using as less labor as possible. This, unfortunately, is the reality. If we are not getting out of it, no matter what we do, no matter what are the precision, whatever, organic or non-organic, it will never fly. We have to rediscuss about the fact that rural areas are not about feeding the cities, are part of our body, like society, and we should have a different relation between cities, urban and rural areas, and stop using them as just a producer of cheap food for cities, because then it will never be sustainable, it will never be compatible with the environment. If this is the narrative.
So thank you for this very nuanced response. Are there further questions or comments, please?
Yeah.
Some comments to Mario, since he raises some very important points. Do someone of you see ways out of this lock-in where, as he has just described, that common agriculture policy goes in doing the same thing again and again? So are there ways to get out of this trap we are in at the moment in Europe? If someone is from outside of Europe, what would be the role of Europe in your view? Is there someone? Stefan? No?
Elizabeth, this is called uncomfortable knowledge. Nobody wants to talk of these things, pretend that they don't exist.
So I'd like to ask a further question. Since I'm a lawyer, I try in my research to work on policy options, on how to resolve these issues. And we then argue usually that we should have more nuanced trade agreements in order to go towards a world where you trade less commodities but more value-added products. That you kind of take out the pressure from the systems, both in Europe and elsewhere, but the answer would be not be non-trading, but importing different things, by adjusting tariffs accordingly and having more nuanced approaches towards trade. Do you also think in this direction?
Yeah, I mean, if the negotiation would be on equal ground, in the sense with the same power among the two parts, of course, this would be the way of doing it. But unfortunately, it's not this way. I mean, the power relation and the power structure is quite uneven. So basically, every time you have this kind of agreement, the rich country are the one getting advantage and the other not. So I agree with you that we could do it better. This could be done better, but unfortunately, the experience that we did so far is different. That all these, look at the emission. If you're looking at the Keeling curve, the CO2 emissions from 60 to now are going up in a straight line. No matter you did the Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol, nothing happened. It's absolutely, how do you say, is a virtual reality. In reality, is nothing is happening. Neither with the, I don't know if you read the IPBS, the last report on biodiversity. Is scaring, is really scaring, and then nothing happens. So I wish I could share your optimism about the fact that we could do agreement that were more respectful of all the actors, because so far it didn't work.
But if you take, for example, the EU-Mercosur agreement, which is has been negotiated and is discussed quite controversially at the moment, it needs to be agreed upon by all European countries and the Parliament of the European countries. So there is kind of a strong opposition towards these agreements, as I observe it, but there are not many options on the table on how to do it differently. And the question here would be whether it would be interesting for you to engage also with those people who work on different kind of options, how it should be formulated in different ways. Sometimes the ideas are not on the table. This is how at least my impression. I don't know whether you have observed this process.
Look, in our project Magic is within the Commission. So basically, we are providing uncomfortable knowledge to the different DG of the Commission and having the reaction. And the fact is that talking is okay, but the moment that you are doing something for real that is touching the interests of individual countries, they don't even can agree on reducing the emission on coal-produced electricity, because some countries, they have coal, do not want to do it. So what I'm saying is that, I don't know, I wish I would have a better answer for you. Okay. I don't know, I'm sorry.
Thank you. There are some 3 questions if you open the Q&A session. One from Mohammed, Habib, Yusuf, and Saima. If you could go through the questions, do you see them or shall I spell them? First one is, I think that is related with government policies, agriculture process and land management. The second one, hello, I don't hear you, you're unmuted. Yeah.
I'm from outside Europe and Southeast Asia, so being honest, I haven't seen any support from Europe in this regard. Yeah, I think he's right. I'm sorry. I tend to be honest in my answer. I'm not sure that Europe is concerned with the, but it's normal. I think that each country is concerned for their own perspective and their own preserve, first of all, their people. And also, I also don't see in the future resources are running out. We will have a problem with the fossil energy. The alternative energy are not picking up. So I don't see that we will have all this room for doing whatever we want, save the planet. And probably we will get to a situation of crisis. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but this is what I feel. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Mario, for this inspiring, a bit pessimistic presentation, but you are totally right. I think it's important to look closely at what happens out there in order to then be able to find solutions to the problem. Okay. With this, I'd like to hand over to Johanna Jacobi. She lives in Bolivia, but Johanna, if you could present yourself afterwards, she will present the participatory guarantee system as quite evolved in Bolivia as one of a solution to the problem. Johanna, please first present yourself, and then you have some 7 to 8 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisabeth. So I'm from the University of Bern, Center for Development and Environment, and I will present the first results of a study in Bolivia on participatory guarantee systems, which is ongoing, but we already have some insights, I hope, this will be a bit more, give some more hope, I don't know. But first, what are participatory guarantee systems? They are locally focused quality assurance systems, and they certify producers based on active participation of stakeholders, and they are built on a foundation of trust, social networks, and knowledge exchange. That's the IFOAM definition. Of course, participatory guarantee systems are usually self-organized, so IFOAM is trying to get this together somehow. There's no authority that says that's it or that is it not. Then there's a peer review assessment from the communities for the ecological fair conditions and so on of the production. And it comprises today over 500,000 of farmers in 76 countries. The thing about PGS is that they are organized locally by producers' organizations or by producer consumer networks. What they have in common are some 6 points. One is standards and norms, then they have sealed and labels, they have documented management procedures, they have pledges, what they will do and what they will not do, define consequences for non-compliance, and mechanisms to verify producer compliance. So this is a map on PGS in the world. The yellow ones are the self-organized PGS, and you see these are the majority. Then the green ones are the state-organized PGS. Here in Bolivia, we have that case. And the blue ones are the ones that are like officially recognized by IFOAM. But most of them are self-organized, that's clear. So we know that from research that the impacts on health and the environment are better than with other types of certification. Then PGS can link producers and consumers in a more accessible, inclusive way than third-party certification. And then it's also an alternative approach to sustainability governance, which is more democratic, more territorial-based, and implies social and local benefits that can really go further. PGS is often not recognized or even threatened by national legislation, and also internationally, which is our topic today on trade, it's still not very common or recognized. So in Bolivia, we have the state PGS. There's a law, there's a National Council on Ecological Production, which organizes it, which sounds very good, but then there's a cost of more than 4,000 Bolivianos, which is about between $500 and $600 for a PGS certification that lasts for 5 years, and it's that price regardless if it's a group of producers or just one person. So we saw first a steep rise in PGS certification in Bolivia, but since 2018 there's a steep decrease also. Has to do with political crisis, has to do with COVID, but so this year is really going back also. But yeah, it's like kind of mixed. For now, we have like data from 11 interviews. We have visited 2 PGS groups, one in Achucalla in the highlands and one in Coroico in the tropical Yungas region. So for some first results, what interviews say is that it's a certification for small farmers. It's not so much thought for big farmers and enterprises. So far it's really like for the small farmers. Then the State Bureau only organizes workshops. It's not really so helpful for them. They also complain, like mostly the farmers, that it's not so really well known yet in Bolivia. There's little demand for organic food, for certified food. And it's of course relatively costly, and few producers are interested because of that cost. So there's now really a lot of uncertainty and little follow-up, which is also not very conducive to PGS. And yeah, it's not really yet helping to promote sustainable food system because it's kind of isolated. Some are certified, but then the neighbors contaminate, deforest, and so on. So it's not a systemic solution yet. And the state, of course, needs to comply with more mechanisms or develop them in the first place for sustainable food and agriculture to have a more holistic solution. That's what interviews told us so far. So then also verify our production of vegetables, no? So far it's really only for the national market. But I was wondering if this should be really defined by what people are producing now, because there are many other things that could be certified by PGS that are exported. For example, there's quinoa, which is a really successful export example of Bolivia. It has PGS, but so far it also has organic certification, which is really, really expensive, which is more like thousands of dollars per year. Then the national market, there's also the successful example of honey, which has an increased demand during the pandemic, and it's known for its high quality that could also be exported. So honey farmers would like to export, but they are limited because they are really small scale. And then there's coffee. Coffee doesn't have PGS yet, but it's a real potential. And we ask now further in the research what is needed that this works. So there's a coffee market that's both promising for national and for export markets. There are organic and fair trade cooperatives, but they're really in crisis in Bolivia because the costs of third-party certification are really, really high, and coffee prices, as we all know, are low. So PGS farmers in Puerto Rico, they produce honey, but they also produce coffee and many other things. But again, PGS is not widely known. Then some conclusions are, of course, the national market is still very limited and that there is no price differentiation. So if I have a certified product, people won't automatically pay more for it. So there's really a need to work beyond the labels. So all food and agriculture should be made more sustainable and not just the certified ones. So there's a need to work with processed food, not just fresh vegetables. And also there is a double potential for national markets, which needs advertisement and selling points, and export possibly for coffee, cocoa, quinoa, Brazil nut, and others. So that could maybe in the long term replace third-party certification and be more self-organized. But it needs more attention, more advertisement, more information, and of course also supportive traders. So what do the trade experts say that we asked so far? Of course, the thing we cannot export the vegetables, but there's the question of what are we going to certify? And then the governments, for example, in Switzerland, they don't actually recognize a private label. So there's nothing about recognition by governments or so, but they can create advantages for PGS products. So for national or for IFOM recognized PGS initiatives, there could be advantages in imports and exports. And here are some pictures of those that I think could be a real potential for Bolivian sustainable agriculture: quinoa, cocoa, and coffee. So this is the last slide. Here are some labels of PGS that are already well known. So it's really a growing thing, and that's the message that I wanted to provide with this talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Johanna, again for an inspiring presentation. Could you? Yeah, thank you. Now we still have time for discussion. I'd like raise a first question. As I'm based in Switzerland, and since Switzerland is not an EU country, we have a bit more space to develop other kinds of trade policies. And at the moment, there's a question being discussed in the Parliament and elsewhere whether we should distinguish at the borders between products which have been produced in a sustainable way and products which have been produced in an unsustainable way. But if the government did differentiate this way, they have to have a line along which they can differentiate. And as I understand the PGS model, since certification schemes are often not accessible for smaller farmers, a PGS model could be something the Swiss government could rely on if certain criteria are complied with. But if you then go to the farmers in Bolivia, would they be, if there was an export market for their products, would they be interested in going this way, or would they rather want to produce for the local market or the region if they get a good price for it? Yeah.
Yes, so far we asked that question. We see that there's a lot of interest. There's a high interest in export of these high-value crops like coffee, cocoa, quinoa, and others. But it's not yet really so well organized. So the PGS, as we have it now, really needs improvements at all levels. So first, the question, is it good that it's government organized? First, of course, we can think it is good, but then it's so limiting, the cost and the lack of organization, it's not very efficient. So first, it needs to improve, I think, as a conclusion in the country. And then there needs to be a collaboration with the other countries, with IFOM, with government, so that it can also be a benefit in international trade. But then, yes, of course, the interest is there. The added value of PGAs to communities is there, is proven, and it can also be, of course, incentivized by other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this. And what criteria would the PGS systems need to comply with in order to ensure sustainability on the ground? You know, if you just say, okay, PGS models are accepted by another country, this would be too difficult. They would say, okay, but there will be a lot of misuse of the system. What would be the core criteria which would need to be complied with so that people consider their production also sustainable? What do you?
So the interesting thing about PGS is that they are not, like, unlike organic, only looking at the ecological side, or unlike fair trade, mostly looking at the working conditions and salaries and so on. They are really both and more. And this is why people who do or have a PGS are really convinced of it, because it allows them to engage in politics. It allows them to declare their territory as far as if it's a group, as being organic and fair. So it's a territorial approach, and it's also both really, we can say, the social ecological system. So from what I've seen, people are really, people who do it are convinced of it, because it's like their life system is much more than just their lettuce production. That's why I think it has a really high potential for being a better sustainability model, not only certification, than others that are in place right now.
Thank you, Johanna, for this interesting insight. With this, I'd like to give to the plenum. Are there questions or comments, please? Stefan, is this your question? If there is no price margin, can you be sure that the system adds value to anybody? Does it relate to Johanna's presentation?
Yes.
Well, it makes sense.
So could you specify your question? Could you explain again?
Well, Johanna, you just mentioned there's no added price to the farmer if they comply to the conditions. And then I'm asking myself, well, if the farmers don't get more money, how can we be sure that if consumers are not willing to pay more, how can we be sure that the system is really generating any added value?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is a special case of Bolivia. I guess it's similar in other developing countries, but we have not yet a better price for that label. But this is a potential that it can be a better price, because other certifications are obtaining better prices. So I think if the PGS becomes more well known, and if it's really like the label for organic, fair, and so on, and sustainable production, then it can achieve a price differentiation. Why not? But it needs a lot of work. It's more about awareness raising and marketing and accessibility for consumers than about the lack of possibility that can happen. So I think this is a potential. It can be reached. It's not possible. It's just not yet the case.
Thank you, Johanna. Just briefly from my side, there are not only the consumers who need to pay a better price, but also the government, who has some instruments kind of to make sure that better prices, that they get a better price than the others who don't produce sustainably. But these measures are not discussed a lot at the moment. Yeah. Further questions? There's another question from Rodrigo Ramos. What's the difficulties to the farmers access this ecological label in their products?
Yeah, well, there are several difficulties. One is, of course, the price that I mentioned, and then it's also that the knowledge that this exists. Actually, a PGS is just, I mean, a group of farmers or some oil farmer that says, hey, we are doing sustainable production, we want a label for it. And many times they do it just in a self-organized way, and that's also PGS, no? So, but the difficulties are the knowledge that this is possible, then also the connection to the value chains is a real issue to consumers. Well, this is one of the main limitations now, that the consumers don't know, or there's not, yeah, and that's also why they don't get a better price. But all these are things that can be resolved. I think this is not something that couldn't be addressed by NGOs, governments, and others. So, yeah, really, I think this is a collection of several social, ecological, economic difficulties that have to be addressed in a holistic way altogether.
So you are more optimistic than Mario. Mario, would you see, are you still here, Mario? And would you see that solution could go in this direction?
Yeah, of course, this is something very useful and something that could really be a first step to change the way we are handling the market of food products. Still, there is a big problem of infrastructure, because bottom line now, the guys that make money are the one distributing, not the one producing food. And then again, we were discussing before, it's about power structure, and then this will require a movement from all the society that we understand that what we are doing now is not sustainable and it's time to do something else. And like the same as Stefan said, we should start thinking about stop eating too much meat. We should stop thinking that the market will solve everything on its own. We cannot expect that the market and technology will solve our problems. Our problem will have to be solved by us. So we have to start rediscussing the way we are organizing things. And of course, having this type of knowledge and this type of possible approaches expand the option space, and definitely this is very good. But again, you cannot expect a small farmer in Bolivia to change the rules of how food is distributed, especially now that we are in a global market economy. So I mean, I believe that the civil society that has to start asking the power, the institution to change the rules. Because with these rules, unfortunately, I work a lot in South America. With this rule, the small farmers do not have many chance to become rich in a short period of time. Let's put it this way. So I would say that this is very nice also because it shows that it's possible to do things in a different way. But then you must have the political will to do things in a different way. That is what I see that is missing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Marius. Also, we have to stop here, but I very much like that you also raised the role of the government besides of the role of the market and the consumers. There's always this third actor. This is the government, who includes many positive and negative incentives at the national, international, and local level. I think we need to look at those incentives and whether they're set right or not. Yeah. With this, thank you very much. I'd like to hand over to Emily Mutea. You're from Kenya, and please present yourself first before starting with your presentation, which is entitled, "Does agricultural commercialization lead to food security?" You have looked you have assessed whether commercialization practices have improved food security records of small-scale farmers in Kenya. But please go ahead, Emily, and please present yourself first. You have some 7 to 8 minutes. Oh, we're a bit late, so yes, I'm sorry. Or if you make shorter, we have more time for discussion. Emily?
Yeah, my name is Emily Mutea. I'm affiliated to Geography Institute, University of Bern, and Center for Training and Integrated Research in National Development in Kenya. And I want to present some work in progress on whether agricultural commercialization results to food security. Some contributors to this work are Joanna Yokobi, Boniface Kitemi, and Stefan Rist. We did the research in Mount Kenya region because it hosts quite a number of commercialized food systems. And rural areas of sub-Saharan Africa are mainly categorized as agrarian economies because most of them, they get their livelihood from agriculture. And in Kenya, 75% of the population is in rural areas, and 80% of this population is involved in agriculture. But the agricultural output, at least 3/4 of it is produced by smallholder farmers with land holdings averaging 0.2 to 3 hectares. And the irony is that these food producers are themselves food insecure, and one of the critical factors that has been found to affect the smallholder farmers is low commercialization levels. And because of this, smallholder farmers in Kenya are being encouraged to commercialize and specialize their production, because it's assumed that farms commercialization, it increases the value of output, which then increases the income levels at a household level, which is then assumed to increase household food security. But then the empirical research that qualifies this positive impact of commercialization on food security is still scarce. And based on this, we identified a research question to assess as to whether agricultural commercialization always results to household food security or not. And to answer this question, we used mixed methods of research to collect data. And one of it was semi-structured questionnaires where we administered to 2 groups of households, food secure households and food insecure households. And the food security indicators that were used to assess the household food security status was household dietary diversity score, food consumption score, coping strategy index, months of adequate household food provisioning, and household food insecurity access scale. And to calculate the degrees of commercialization, we used 4 indices of commercialization, and one is the crop commercialization index, which is calculated by getting the gross value of crops that were sold over the gross value of the crops that were produced. And for the crop input commercialization index, we use the gross value of the crops inputs that were purchased over the crops, over the gross value of the crops that were produced. And to calculate the livestock product commercialization index, we calculate the gross value of the livestock products that were sold over the gross value of the livestock products that were produced. And for the labor commercialization index, we calculate the value of the labor that was sold over the total value of labor at household level. And the results on commercialization indicates that if we look at the crops output commercialization index, we actually see that both food insecure and food secure households, they had relatively high degrees of commercialization, with food insecure households actually having a higher commercialization index in terms of crops output, although the difference is not significant. And for the crop input commercialization index, you see that the food insecure households, they use more money to purchase the crop inputs compared to the food secure households. And for the livestock products commercialization index, it's quite high for both households, although it was slightly higher for the food secure households. And for the family labor, we see that food insecure households, they are more involved in selling their labor. And calculating the average commercialization index based on these 4 indices, we see that food insecure households, they actually have a higher degree of commercialization. And this is a puzzling result because we don't see any relationship between commercialization and food security, and then meaning we cannot always have a rationale that higher commercialization will always lead to food security. And further preliminary findings show that one factor that puts the food insecure households at a disadvantage is based on the land holdings. We see that the food secure households, they had twice the size of land compared to the food insecure households, which is a significant difference. And having far less land has got several disadvantages. It's limits a household from producing sufficient food, because households, they need the food for home consumption and they need enough surplus for selling in order to cover the production deficits and also to cover other household expenses. And because of this, the small lands, they do not produce for the entire family, and this forces households to commercialize their labor. And most of these food insecure households, they involve themselves in low-paying jobs, especially casual laborers at smallholder farms, which does not provide enough income for food, for buying food, and also for other expenses. Another disadvantage of having smaller pieces of land, it limits a household from practicing crop rotation, which is a fertility management practice, and this reduces the yields, which eventually will make it difficult for them to make a choice of what to sell or what to consume. It also reduces the capacity of a household to do mixed farming and especially keep livestock, which is usually a coping strategy from shops. And because of this, because of problem of fodder provision and space, it also leads to extreme intercropping, which results to nutrient and water competition.
Emily, should go to, yeah.
And based on this, one of the recommendations we can say is to have a redistributive land reform that ensures minimum levels of land tenure per household. And this will give the same opportunities for all smallholder farmers to benefit from commercialization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily, for again an inspiring, very inspiring presentation and interesting insights. A first question from my side: would you then recommend the farmers not to engage in commercialization as long as the conditions are not better, or would you rather recommend them to commercialize in a different way? Or?
I think commercialization is necessary because most of them, that's their source of livelihood. They needed to get some income for them to be able to take care of other expenses. And also commercialization helps them to get money in order to buy more food. The only thing is, at least if they can be able to maybe increase their land size for them to be able to increase the yields, for it to make a economic benefits for them to commercialize, but it's really necessary.
Okay, thank you very much. We are a bit short in time, but this is also because we've started a bit late. Charlotte, could we have some 5 minutes more? I hope so. Huh? So I'd like to open the floor to everyone. Would someone have a question to Emily or?
I would like to answer the question you just you asked. You would cut into somebody else's presentation.
Yeah, but we have started a bit late, yeah, already. Huh? 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. So who would like to ask Emily something? There is a question of Mohammed asking, what are the impacts of agricultural commercialization on policies and sustainability of natural resources?
Okay, one of the impacts is for commercialization to make economic sense, policies, they need to have policies that really support value chain, because most of the commercialization process doesn't make economic sense because smallholders are usually they don't benefit the way they're supposed to benefit, because the middlemen, especially in Kenya, they exploit the farmers. And also for the sustainability of natural resources, most of the commercialization processes, they tend to increase the use of inputs, and this might degrade natural resources. But if there's a way to maybe improve or have other ways of commercializing without using a lot of agrochemicals, then it could make more sustainable sense in use of natural resources.
Thank you very much. Other questions?
Yeah, can I ask something?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I would like to know whether you find as well a smaller size of the herd of the animals for the insecure, because it should be the parallel of the land. Those insecure, in general, you use animals as a banking account, and then whether or not when they are more in trouble, tend to liquidate the bank account to operate with the smaller earth size or not?
So for the food secure households, most of them, they opted not to have livestock at all. And for the ones who had, they had different, like the number of like 3 different types, but the number for each type would be very limited.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, Emily, I'm sorry we have to stop here. This is a bit unfortunate, but we're coming. We are very tight in time. I'm sorry for this, Emily. What I also very much liked from your presentation is, since you showed the link of, if we try to make the link to the overall topic, you know, you showed that there's a link between land management and land ownership and fair trade. Yes. As you argue that commercialization does only make sense if you have a good plot of land and not if you don't have enough land for production, if I understand it correctly. This is a very interesting, I think, linkage you're making here. With this, I'd like to hand over to our last presenters. It's Jose Armesto Lopez, and he talks about the post-productivist food systems in Spain. Please, Jose, present yourself first.
Okay.
Some 7 to 8 minutes.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Jose, as you well said, and I'm an associate professor of the Department of Geography of the University of Barcelona. And I'll try to explain our research with these slides in a few minutes. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, I think you can see it.
It's working, yes.
Okay.
So, just on 7 minutes, if possible.
Okay, yeah. I'll try it. This contribution was carried out with my 3 colleagues. You can see their names and affiliation on the screen. And to end this slide, let me say that our work was made within the framework of a research project entitled Sustainability Assessment of Post-Productivist Food Chains in Spain. Okay, so this presentation was structured in 5 parts. First, I'll present you the research objectives. Second, I'll try to point out very quickly some introductory issues. In the 3rd section, I would like to give you some notes about the methodological process. The 4th section is dedicated to present the results in 2 directions: the product's scope dimensions and the relationships between the sustainability and the interviewed stakeholders. And finally, I tried to finish our presentation drawing some conclusions and final remarks. Related with the objectives in this research, we have tried to identify the geographical scope of the main regional products, and we have tried to deep into the knowledge about the stakeholders' attitudes and beliefs regarding some different aspects, as for example, as you can see in the slide, the competitiveness of the products, their sustainability in a broad sense, and the relationships established with the social and the environmental and geographical frameworks in which are generated. So in a very summarized way, we can say that in recent years, there has been a growing sensibility on environmental issues. This change has had an affectation on multiple levels, like science, obviously, if not, we will be here, mass media, the civilian society, the different links of the agri-food change, the agrarian owners or the market enterprises would be a pair of examples, and finally, the policymakers. So we can state that post-productivism could be a new development scope. On this 5th slide, you can see some summarized figures that could help you to understand the Spanish food sector. You have to notice that it's an important sector. For example, it occupies 11% of the GDP of the Spanish economy and employs more than 2 million people. We have to say that in this big conglomerate, the food options that we have considered in this concept of post-productivism still being minority, but they are constantly growing and they are beginning to change some consumption patterns. In the next two slides, you can see some keys about our methodological process. After a necessary bibliographic and documentary review, we selected the 4 study regions that tries to cover the main Spanish food environments. In this map, you can see the Atlantic productions in Galicia, in northwestern part of Iberian Peninsula, the high mountain productions in Catalonia, in the Pyrenees areas, and you can see the Mediterranean productions in Andalusia, in the southern part of Spain, and the continental or inland productions in Castile, in the center, in the middle of the Castilian plateau, in the middle of Spain. In those regions, we carried out 17 in-depth interviews with different stakeholders covering different typologies of products. As you can see here, the median profile of the interviewed stakeholder was a man of on the 50 years that is the owner or manager of an enterprise that is 26 years working and that occupies 11 employees, that works on the production, transformation, and or marketing of these products that you can see here: cheese, milk, key products, fruits, vegetables, etc. This table tries to summarize main characteristics related with the research. As you can see in the first column, we can see the location in a scale of province. Province is the equivalence in the European Union is the NUT 3 scale or level of administrative intervention. The second column shows the character of the company, if there is a production company or a transformation company and or a commercialization company. The third column identifies the category of differentiated products: organic with and without official certification, designation of origin, etc. You can see on the right box the key to identify these typologies. And finally, you can find the territorial brand if the company has one in the last of these columns. Obviously, each role corresponds to a different interviewed stakeholder or interviewed company. Very quickly, we can say, related with the product dimensions, that the exact difference among products are due to the idiosyncrasy of the product, the type of territorial brand, and the productive philosophy of a stakeholder, being PDOs and PGIs companies, the ones that export more product, and local business, those who focus their products in the nearest locations. The results concerning with the relationships between stakeholders and sustainability show us the commitment and concern go hand in hand in a good part of interview with the stakeholders. Some questions and worries of those participants and some different approaches to sustainability as a question that concerns their businesses. In that sense, you can see, or you can read some examples of literacy sentences said by them.
You have 1 minute.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And to conclude, we can say that there is an important increase of post-productivist or differentiated foods. There is no solid evidences of common distribution range patterns among different companies. Only some features are similar, considering the same kind of identified foods, like origin or food or preference distribution channel. The interviewed stakeholders play an active role regarding sustainability, but some of them think only in inputs dimensions, not in outputs dimensions. That's all, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jose, for again an inspiring presentation. We have some, 3 minutes left, so I'd like to directly give the forum to the participants. Are there some questions? There is a question of Rodrigo. Jose, what was the criteria to choose these 4 study cases from rural reality in Spain? And if we consider representative from all the country?
Okay, we try to, with our scope, we try to cover all the main productions of Spain. So as said, we want to try to cover the Atlantic production, the Mediterranean production, the mountain production, and the plateau or inland production. That's the reason because we try these 4 regions to represent all the landscapes, all the agroecosystems of the Spanish main products of agricultural production.
Thank you. Is there another question? Otherwise, I'd like to ask you, what would that now, to which extent are your insights relevant for trade to promote food sustainability? What would it mean that you need to have better declaration of origin, or what would it mean here?
Okay. When we think about this sustainability option or this sustainability thinking, we have to think about 4 different dimensions. The economic dimension, that these PDOs or PGIs helps to reach a better amount of money, a better income. We have to think on social dimensions. This kind of productions could help to fix a population to the rural world. We have to think on the environmental dimension. For example, all the organic productions are examples of feed, and we have to think about the sustainability dimension in a broad sense that conglomerates all of these parts of the sustainability.
Okay, thank you. And then further a last comment or question? Yeah, we should finish here. I think I'm sorry for being late. It was a bit.
No, all's good.
Try to manage it a bit strict, but then there's not enough time to discuss the last 2 presentations. But anyway, I feel that we should. It was so very inspiring. I have the feeling we should all meet in make a workshop on. What are the problems out there and what could be nice options also with regard to trade and government decisions and government policies shaping trade in different ways. That would be nice to meet you again, and thank you very much for all these inspiring insights.